What's up everyone, I'm Twisted. Today I just wanna go over the content and lore we can expect for this season. After the dev update we got last week, we now know everything that's coming in Act 1, but I think this also gives us an idea of what's coming in Act 2. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about early expectations and predictions for Season 1, including the potential of not having a new champion this season, and of Season 2 being themed after an alternate universe. Consider this a follow-up to my video from last month. If you haven't seen it yet, I recommend you do so before watching this one. Alright, let's first talk about the new metagame, Demacia Rising. After I made that video, we've learned quite a lot about it. Too much, actually. The whole game got pretty much leaked, or at least a huge part of it. The game is out right now. It's about Tiana Crownguard teaching her niece, Lux, about the rise of the Kingdom of Demacia. According to the support page, the game is getting an update in Act 2. We know this game will eventually lead to modern Demacia. So, just like last year, where we experienced the reign of Sonozol, but also modern Noxian culture, here we'll get a taste of both the past and present of Demacia. Present, quote-unquote. Remember, the new present is actually 7 years before what used to be the present. So yes, Lux is now a teenager. I haven't been able to play the game yet, but from what I've seen so far, I'm not expecting any major lore reveals here. Just a bunch of nice references, maybe even new details, just like what happened with the Demon's Hand game last year, ignoring the big reveal at the end of course. I think this game, and a lot of the season in general, is going to mostly be an introduction of the region to new players and new lore fans. So I'm keeping my expectations low when it comes to major lore reveals or expansions for now. I'll come back to this game later when I transition into the upcoming champion, but now let's move on to the other confirmed lore experiences coming in Act 1 of this season. At the end of this month and the start of February, we are getting 2 motion comics. Spearhead will focus on Yunara. We can see the throne of Demacia in the background, so I'm expecting this to be about her talking with both Jarvans about Shin's death. For the Fallen, we'll focus on Garen, likely meeting the families of the soldiers that were killed in the cinematic. That's something he also does in his novel. So both of these comics are tied to the events of the new cinematic, something that was also officially confirmed in the last dev update. The cinematic was divided into 4 separate scenes and only 2 of them seem to be explored in Act 1. So it's very likely that the other 2, the one about Sona and the one about Shyvana and Quinn, will be explored in Act 2. And this lines up perfectly with content we know is coming later. Shyvana's update was confirmed to be coming in the second act of this season, so it makes sense for her part of the cinematic to be further explored when this gets released. As for Sona, we got confirmation that in Act 2, we're getting a new skin line themed around the darker side of Demacia. Minor spoilers, but we've already seen what the upcoming prestige skin for Sona looks like, and it does seem to fit the description of a darker side of Demacia. So Sona's part in the cinematic is likely getting explored whenever the skin line is released. The new Morgana skin was also present as a statue in Sona's part, and we can see its stained glass aesthetic in this new Sona skin, so it's possible that we'll see more of this design again in a couple months. Now, we do not know how these 2 parts will be explored. In Act 1 we are getting 2 motion comics, and this is already as much as seasons tend to get. All 3 seasons last year had 2 motion comics each. In the dev update, they did mention that we are getting, quote, a handful of motion comics throughout the season, so maybe we're getting more than 2 this time around. Regardless of how these are explored, the new season cinematic, like most cinematics, was very weak in terms of actual lore, so I can't wait to actually get more context about what was happening in each scene we saw. Hey, if you're watching this video so far, you are probably not subscribed. So if you enjoy this type of content, consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's free and you can always change your mind later. Now that we know what lore experiences we can expect, let's actually look at the bigger picture. So last year, all 3 seasons were part of an overarching narrative. There was a plot that tied them all together. This was something they even mentioned when they first revealed the new thematic season format. But after watching the new cinematic and now discussing what we can expect in terms of lore this season, I'm not sure if this will happen this year. So far the lore of this season seems all over the place. We got 5 different stories, all disconnected from each other. So right now, and do keep in mind it's still very early to be sure about this, I don't see what the major narrative of this year could be. Season 1 of last year had LeBlanc and later also Shin as the connecting tissue between everything that was happening. This year doesn't seem to have something like that, at least not yet. Now, there not being a major overarching narrative throughout the year is not necessarily a bad thing. The one we got last year wasn't really that well executed, if we're being honest, and a major complaint people had was how slow the story progressed. So, if this year we're focusing on more, though smaller, stories, I can see that working better, though this will come at the cost of the lore not really moving forward in any major way, which again, not necessarily a bad thing, it really depends on how it will be executed. Having the seasons disconnected from each other does open the door for something I'm not too excited about, which is the potential of seasons being based on alternate universes / skin lines. I'm sure a lot of people would love a season based on Star Guardian, for example, but personally I would rather the focus being on the canon world of Runeterra. But since Meddler did say that this was something they were considering for 2026, it really wouldn't surprise me if season 2 was set in an alternate universe. And again, this would explain why we don't see an overarching narrative yet in season 1. But again, this is just very early speculation on my part. It's possible that one of these storylines is going to evolve into something bigger and we just don't know yet. Now finally, let's talk about the new champion. So far we've gotten 2 separate dev updates about season 1, and you might have realized that neither of them mention a new champion coming this season. Like, at all. No teaser, no hints, nothing. Now, this really shouldn't be a big deal. We're getting more dev updates this season, and they could be saving the champion reveal for Act 2. What makes this odd is the contrast with what happened last year. In 2025, the new champions were at the forefront of the updates and reveals. Mel coming to League after season 2 of Arcane was a big deal, and she was prominently featured everywhere. Yunara was teased in the comics and dev updates and in the season 2 cinematic before her official reveal, and Zahan was teased all the way back in January, and the year basically ended with his official reveal. But this year it seems like we are shifting gears. We haven't even gotten any confirmation that we are getting one champion per season like last year. I assume this is still the case, but we really can't know for sure because Riot hasn't said anything yet. They've talked about the Shyvana update and we got a decent idea of the content and lore that's coming this season, so it's weird that they haven't mentioned the new champion at all. To me, there are 2 possible reasons for this. The first is that revealing the champion this early would spoil something. Maybe the ending of the metagame, maybe an upcoming lore experience, or maybe an even bigger project they have in store, like a Demacia animated show or live action series. I can definitely see that being the case, but if so, I do feel like they would have at least mentioned it in the last dev update. Something like, hey, stay tuned for a champion to make its way to the Rift later in Act 2. Not mentioning a new champion at all is very suspicious, which leaves me to option 2. Maybe there won't be a new champion this season. Riot has talked about new champion fatigue in the past, how players just aren't as excited for new champions as they used to be. It's the reason we went from 5 or 6 a year to only 3. Maybe last year, the feedback that Riot gathered led them to conclude that there's no need to release a champion every season. And so, for Demacia, will be our first thematic season without a new champion. But Riot is usually transparent when it comes to stuff like this. If they did conclude that players didn't want a new champion, I think they would have told us right from the start. Because right now, the expectation is that a new champion is coming. And they would probably want us to know that that wouldn't happen as soon as possible. So for now, I do think there's a new champion coming, and not for example another champion update or even just Shyvana and nothing else. I do believe we're getting Shyvana's update alongside a new champion, just like we got Mel and LeBlanc, as well as Shin and Zahan. Maybe it's opium on my part because these did come out in separate acts, but we'll have to wait and see. And for now, I do believe this is going to be Cithria and not for example Tiana or a brand new character. Though if it was Tiana, I can't deny that saving that reveal for the end of the metagame would make a lot of sense. Also worth noting that Tiana is voiced in the game, so it's possible that her VA worked on voice lines for both the game and Tiana as a champion around the same time. But again, I'm leaning more toward it being Cithria for now. For some reason her wooden sword can be found on the Summoner's Rift, it's next to this broken gold piece which is the crest we see on Jarvan in the new cinematic, and on a letter that content creators got from Riot. This letter was an invitation to join the Demacian Silverwing Riders. Lady of the Cloud Cithria does ride a Silverwing. We've seen a lot of Silverwing imagery recently. Of course this could just be tied to Demacia in general, or to Jarvan like we saw in the cinematic, but we could also be seeing a new champion tied to Silverwings like Cithria. But this is not even what makes me believe Cithria might become the new champion. What really sells it for me is, and I must put a spoiler warning, this is content that was leaked by Riot, but leaks are still leaks. If you don't want to see them, skip to this timestamp. Alright? What really makes me believe Cithria will be the new champion is the recent TFT leak. There are files in the game right now for both child and adult versions of Cithria, suggesting that she was at least planned to come to set 16 of TFT. The problem here is that, well, she's nowhere to be found in a set yet. So was she just an exclusive unit that got scrapped for some reason, or is she coming later in the set when she's finally revealed for League? I think that's likely going to be the case. Assuming she wasn't scrapped, I don't see why they would work on a unit, exclusive or otherwise, and only release it so late into the set unless that release was tied to something larger like a new league champion, or better yet, a new event between multiple games. Leaks over, but like I mentioned in my last video, the previous dev update had copyright for TFT, Wild Rift and LOR, despite these games not being mentioned in the video. The same thing happened again in the latest dev update, though at least this time Wild Rift was mentioned. Maybe whoever worked on this just copy-pasted it from another dev update, but I do think this is here because we are going to see Demacian content coming to these games in some way. And obviously that could mean that the upcoming Demacian champion will be joining TFT's current set. Finally, I also think it would be fun if Wild Rift got Nora around the same time League PC got Cithria, since both are mostly only known as LOR characters, despite actually being in the lore prior to their inclusion in the game. Also, because I know someone will mention it, I am ignoring timeline stuff. I know Lady of the Clouds shouldn't work this early in the timeline, without some retcons. Her lore was a mess anyway even before Arcane became canon, so I'm not too worried about it getting a small retcon. Also, just because she is associated with Silverwings, that doesn't mean that she will have one in-game. And that was everything I wanted to talk about. Let me know down below your thoughts on all of this. Do you think there will be a major storyline in this season or just small ones? Do you think next season will be themed after the skin line? Are you worried about League not getting a new champion this season? Or is that something you don't mind? Tell me all about it in the comments down below. And consider subscribing if you haven't already. It's free and you can always change your mind later. I'm Twisted and I'll see you guys in the next video.